While absolutely not being as hyped up as Carlotta is, Roccia definitely still has her fans. But for a lot of these, pulling for Roccia is still a conflict due to all the mixed opinions about her around the community. So, should you pull for Roccia or not? Well, I'm going to be listing some of her pros and cons, and then you can decide whether or not you want to pull for Roccia or not. So these are Roccia's biggest pros and cons. First of all, one of the best things Roccia does is buff basic attack damage. And it's not just about the basic attack damage buffing here. It's specifically about the fact that she can serve as a replacement for one of the best characters in the game, being Sanhua. For the Tower of Adversity, you need a total of 3 teams. But if you don't have many of the 5-star sub DPS characters, most of your teams are going to end up wanting to use Sanhua, and that is a really big problem since there's only one Sanhua in existence. Most of these characters want to use Sanhua due to her low field time, which no one else in the game can truly replicate the way that Sanhua does it. The only one that can actually compete is Yang Yang. This makes it so that Sanhua is a very desired character for a lot of people, because they just don't have the supports that their DPSs really need, and then Sanhua ends up being their best bet. But Roccia is here to save the day, because she is able to buff basic attacks as well. So for example, if you are trying to run your Encore in the Tower of Adversity, you might struggle if your Sanhua is on another side, but because Roccia is capable of buffing basic attacks, you can use her instead of Sanhua, and while it won't do as well, it will still do well enough while also freeing up your Sanhua in the meantime. Another big plus that Roccia brings to the table is the fact that she is the strongest grouping in the entire game. And when I say strongest in the game, I mean it's better than Genshin and Yang Yangs and Shorekeepers. It is by far the largest range in the game. So why does this matter exactly? Most of the content in the game is bosses after all. Well, sort of. We also have the Pincer Maneuver event, which seems to reset every single time there is a new banner. And Pincer Maneuver is a very AoE heavy event, featuring 0 bosses. A lot of people I know have been struggling with this event because they just don't have the AoE to actually take care of it. But because Roccia has such strong, but also long-lasting grouping, she'll be able to turn this event into an actual joke. And it's not just Pincer Maneuver that wants you to use AoE. Obviously, Tower has some AoE in it as well. Obviously, there's the second and third floor of the left and right towers, but these don't have a lot of HP. But what does matter is the first wave of the left tower, as well as the first wave of the second chamber of the middle tower. These always feature an AoE floor that will have you gathering up enemies, and if you don't gather them up or kill them fast enough, they might become a chore and can actually cost you your run. So having strong and consistent grouping can help a lot in those scenarios, just like in Pincer Maneuver. And then finally, for her good points, there's the fact that she has a very strong synergy with one of the strongest DPS characters in the game, being Camellya. Now obviously, you don't need me to tell you that having a synergy with an incredible DPS character is a very strong asset to have. Roccia's Ultra skill being able to buff Havoc and basic damage is literally perfect for Camellya. And Camellya also really likes the grouping that Roccia provides, because she's actually not really able to move. So this grouping can actually be quite useful for her. But this pro is actually a double-edged sword, because moving on to the negatives, Roccia isn't even best in slot with Camellya. Yep, there you have it. A character with perfect buffs for Camellya is not even her best support. And this is for a variety of reasons. Now, while Roccia does have some good things up her sleeve, being the fact that she can run Night Veil, has high personal damage, and obviously her Ultra skill, she has the very unfortunate problem of having to compete with Sanhua. And if you know anything about Sanhua, it's that she is really good. Like, disgustingly so. Sanhua's insanely low field time, combined with the fact that she can run Moonlit Clouds and Impermanence Heron, just makes her a really hard character to beat, and unfortunately, Roccia fails at this. because, well, moving on to the second point, she actually has a very long field time of her own. This is because she needs to fully max out her forte in order to even begin doing her combo. And even when you do have max forte, it's still gonna take a bit before you're actually finished with spending it all. So she's gonna end up having a pretty long field time, which is a really big shame, because if you again look at Sanhua, her field time is so much lower, and what Roccia provides in return isn't really that much benefit. Because outside of her Ultra skill, the only thing that Roccia actually has over Sanhua is her personal damage. But when we're looking at a DPS that is as strong as Camellya is, the field time really matters just so much more. Because if your rotation is longer, your overall DPS just goes down. And this is also not helped by the fact that Roccia really needs her intro skill. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, it's once again because we're comparing her to Sanhua, who doesn't need her intro skill. The fact that Sanhua doesn't need her intro skill makes her able to run a separate rotation for Camellya that can actually be better for her and is absolutely way less punishing for if you miss any of her hits. This being a double intro Camellya rotation. This means that after Shorekeeper's rotation, you go instantly into Camellya, do one full spin, and then you activate Sanhua's Ultra skill buff, after which you're able to do 2 fully buffed spins in budding mode that are fully able to benefit from Sanhua's Ultra skill. And this is actually a very strong tactic, one that Roccia is not able to replicate, because she needs her intro skill to generate Forte. Because the Forte generation is actually a really big deal for Roccia. And then finally, Roccia's animations just are kinda hard to work with. In a game that is so focused around precision dodging, it's incredibly counterintuitive to have a character who has animations where she just kinda bounces around and you can just get knocked on your ass. Now obviously Camellya has this too, which means that if you're giving Roccia the same issue, you're just gonna end up with a team that just doesn't feel good to play. But I will admit that this is more of a nitpick. So, are you still going to be pulling for Roccia even after all that I said? I think it's a really weird decision for Kuro to introduce a dedicated Camellya buffer right away, especially since Sanhua is such a strong character. Roccia being so soon made it incredibly hard for her to be good enough to stand above Sanhua. But that's just my opinion. If you disagree, be sure to let me know in the comments, or join my Discord to try and get into a discussion with me. You could also message me on Twitter for this. If you learned something new or if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. But that'll be it from me. Peace.